Do social changes drive economic behavior, or do economic changes drive social behavior? And if this is the case, if you are trying to accomplish goals on one front or the other, which type of policy do you attack first? I'm going to address this and more in this current video. Welcome to Analyzing Finance with Nick. I am Nicholas Pardini from Davos Macro Research, and I try to explain what moves economies, what moves markets, and what social and economic trends are out there, and how does it actually affect your real life. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about a trend that I've noticed, and that is the trend of economics driving social issues. Usually people think, oh, social issues change because people have become more morally enlightened, and as a result, the economy and corporations adapt to a more socially different society, and societal changes are what drive the changes in economic decision making. Where I think this logic is absolutely backwards, and it's really actually economic changes that drive social change. I use the example in my Iceberg of Economics series, where I talk about the reason why that parents are more forgiving of their adult children living with them past the age of college graduation, or about 22. It is because, not because they've all of a sudden have a lot more empathy for the next generations and families are a lot more closer knit than they used to be. No, it's more simply economics. Like, the cost of living on one's own and having your own house or apartment are a lot more expensive and prohibitive for most recent graduates. And so as a result, people are living with their parents longer than they used to. And that's just one, and that's the least controversial example. But let's take this a step further. A lot of social conservatives, and even just some more moderate people nowadays, are complaining about degeneracy in society, about how morals have become more loose, and that people are, especially younger generations, are living in a more hedonistic and morally lazy lifestyle for the most part. As you look at basically just the moral standards and what was considered socially acceptable behavior in a variety of different avenues, so I'm say like 1960 to 2023, it's been a gradual process of more degenerate lifestyle and behavioral choices and a less morally society. People will say, oh, that's just the nature of having more social freedom, and that people are less religious, and therefore they're going to have more individuality and express themselves. And that would have happened no matter how good the economy is. And actually, the fact that we have a more socially liberal society has resulted in people making different economic choices in terms of what cities they live in and what they spend on. However, what if I gave you an alternative theory on this? It's not really just a sudden loss of morality that happened over the last 50 years, like a lot of social conservatives complain, or a great awakening of enlightenedness and open-mindedness that social liberals would complain. How about let's look at this in terms of an economic problem. And the economic problem is really just simply the divergence between the cost of living a traditional life, as implied by a social conservative, relative to the cost of living a morally degenerate life, an alternative lifestyle, if I wanted to put a more politically correct name on this. And that is exactly, if you look at the financial incentives, and both purely economic in terms of hard dollar, and non-economic, which is basically things that are not like an immediate dollar cost, but do lead to longer term economic outcomes, and see what happens to the cost of each type of lifestyle over time. And if you look at the data on this, you could see basically that the cost of living a degenerate lifestyle has gotten way cheaper, and the cost of living a traditional lifestyle has gotten extremely expensive and is mostly unaffordable outside of the upper middle classes and the wealthy. And paradoxically, a lot of the upper middle classes and the wealthy who preach this more live and let live lifestyle actually live the most socially conservative lifestyles in practice, in terms of, say, like buying a house, having 2 to 3 kids, not letting them participate in some of the negative influences of society. In fact, if you look at some of the most radically social conservative Americans, they tend to have the means to afford being able to shelter their families from mainstream society. It's not a bunch of uneducated, low-income people. If you look at uneducated, low-income people, they're the ones who have a lot of the higher rates of quote-unquote degenerate behaviors, such as substance abuse or having kids out of wedlock, or increased alcohol abuse rates, or any other type of what is considered negative moral behavior, breakdowns of divorce rates, breakdowns of families. So it's actually the lower income people that are the ones who are the more socially liberal lifestyles, and the higher income people are living more socially conservative lifestyles, in terms of like intact families, buying a house, prioritizing education over vices, etc. So what is happening here? Well, let's look at all the steps. First, let's look at the cost of substance abuse. It is cheaper now than ever to partake in those activities. I have to be careful because I don't want YouTube to censor this video about how I say this stuff. But like the example, if you look at the cost of recreational substances and adjusted for inflation, they are down over 30% since the 1980s. Whereas the costs of productive things, such as buying a house or going to college, has increased relative to inflation by many more magnitudes than that. The cost of raising kids has gone up. The cost of having a wedding has gone up a lot higher than inflation. Where the cost of going out for a night of partying, adjusted for inflation, is lower now than ever has been. Again, also the cost of adult entertainment, or just mindlessly doing nothing but watching TV and consuming content or playing video games, has gone down. Like, I remember when I was a kid and I wanted to buy a Nintendo 64 game, it was $60 in 1990s dollars. If I want to buy the same game for that Switch or a PS3, it's about $60. Maybe some of the higher end ones are $70. But given the price level has increased by more than 50% since then, the cost of playing video games has declined a lot. And a lot of these video games now are a lot longer in terms of hours of content, have a lot more to do, and a whole online element. So if you factor in just the entertainment dollar per hour, it's cheaper than ever. Same with watching sports or watching any sort of TV. The cost of streaming, or what, you can watch this for free, example, on YouTube. Whereas, like previously, 20 years ago, you would had to have subscriptions to cable TV, or buy a bunch of hard video cassettes or DVDs, or to have that same type of entertainment. And also the cost of air travel has gone down a lot. So it's a lot cheaper to go on a vacation now than it has been in the past. So a lot of shorter term thrill type things are a lot more affordable. Or they're a lot, and it's not just in money, in terms of access to and social stigma. Say if you wanted to gamble 25 years ago, you had to either go to Vegas or Atlantic City, and if people found out you were doing that on a regular basis, you would have a lot of shame and social stigma. And that might not be a financial cost. It's a real cost in terms of like your reputation among your friends and family. And there might be hard economic costs as a result from that social stigma. And it's not just in gambling, it's also in other things, which I'm going to get into, but I'm just going to use gambling as an easy example. Now, gambling has been legalized in most US states. The social stigma towards gambling has gone away, and now you don't even have to leave your house in many places in the United States or over in Europe to gamble. You can just basically play a virtual slot machine on your phone, or bet on any sports game anywhere from an app on your phone without having to get out of bed. So just in terms of, so it may not be like the cost of gambling in itself, in terms of the bookie spread, is not any cheaper today, but you don't have to drive to the casino anymore, fly to the casino. People don't have to know that you're gambling a bunch of money that you were previously not. And you can do it in the comfort of your own home. So it is effectively a lot cheaper. And substance abuse is the same thing, not just in terms of hard costs, but also due to the legalization of all that stuff, along with decreased social stigma. If you are known for having a reputation for consuming that kind of thing, it's not going to hurt you as much for finding employment or maintaining your social relationships. So the social costs are locked down. Normalization of divorce and the normalization of non-traditional families, and the fact that the social welfare system, there's more likely to be there as a floor and a safety net to protect particularly those type of broken family arrangements, has made the cost of pursuing this type of lifestyle a lot more affordable than it would have been 2 generations ago. Whereas again, now the cost, due to the increased cost of housing, college education, and other factors, the fact that also a lot of the elite universities are so competitive nowadays that if you want to have kids who are successful, you have to put them through a bunch of extracurriculars that cost money that you wouldn't have had to do previously. The cost of raising kids the quote-unquote right way is way more expensive, and that doesn't even account the fact that you have to make a lot more money, and therefore you move up to a higher tax bracket and you're paying a lot of more taxes to do that too. So on an after-tax basis, it's even more expensive to live a more socially conservative lifestyle. And so what have we seen as a result? A lot of young people say, hey, look, I'll never make enough money to provide the same type of childhood that my parents did for me, so I'm just going to enjoy the decline. And they may not say this out loud or really even know it, but subconsciously, the price signals of the market are telling you, like, look, the old style of living is no longer viable. And so as a result, I'm going to pursue the new style because it gives me something, at least I can enjoy my life, even if objectively a lot of the previous goals that I would have traditionally wanted are no longer attainable. So what does this mean from a public policy perspective? It means that if you really are a socially conservative-minded person and want to see a more moral society, or if you're a social liberal person and you want to see morality go a different way, then you need to change the incentive structure by changing the economic incentives. It's not enough to say simply shame people for being bad or passing legislation to ban things if you're not solving the underlying problem or providing an alternative to make the type of lifestyle you would find ideal to be more affordable and more achievable. So, for example, instead of simply just trying to ban undesirable behavior or try to just complain about it and vote on grievances, you'd have to pass economic policy that incentivizes a different behavior, or simply just eliminate the policies right now that incentivize morally bad behavior. Like, there's so much moral hazard that by simply just eliminating a lot of the moral hazard, whether in terms of the social safety net or in terms of restrictions that make housing way more unaffordable than it should be, and regulations that prevent people from building businesses, or a lot of other red tape that prevent people from being able to afford a more conventional, traditional lifestyle, you'll see a lot of these problems be fixed. I'm not going to go into specific policy solutions in this. I might do that in a future video if people request it. But I just want to change your framework. Like, instead of trying to fight over cultural war and social issues by hitting them directly, instead you have to say, what economic incentives are driving people to have the views that you find socially detestable, whether you're on the right or the left? And if so, how do I change these incentives to have people have a more moral or just behavioral system, and will adjust their behavior in a way that is more pro-social. Let me know what you think about this. And if you like this type of content, feel free to like, share, subscribe, and engage in the comments. If you disagree with me and you think that I have this all backwards, I'd like to see that in the comments. Or if you agree and you've seen some anecdotal examples of what I'm talking about, also feel free to comment. Thank you for watching.